He thought humiliating her would make him look stronger, but he had no idea he had just stepped into the one moment that would expose everything he believed about power. The late afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of the dojo, casting long golden lines across the polished mats as students moved with practiced precision, their uniforms crisp, their voices low, controlled, confident. The air carried the quiet intensity of discipline, the kind that separated amateurs from those who had earned their place. And then the door opened. Amanda Brooks stepped inside without a sound, her simple gray hoodie and worn sneakers out of place among the sharp uniforms and black belts lining the room. She didn't announce herself. She didn't need to. But eyes turned anyway. Not with curiosity. With judgment. Jason Carter noticed her immediately. He always did. It was a skill he had perfected over years of teaching, spotting weakness before it even spoke. His gaze moved slowly from her shoes to her posture, measuring, dismissing, deciding. A faint smile formed at the corner of his mouth, the kind that never reached his eyes. He had already made up his mind about her before she even stepped fully onto the mat. "You here for the beginner fitness class?" he asked, loud enough for the room to hear, his tone light, but edged with something sharper underneath. A few students chuckled. Amanda paused, just for a fraction of a second, then shook her head gently. "I'm here to train," she said, her voice calm, steady, almost too quiet for the space. That was enough. The room shifted. A few more smirks. Someone whispered something under their breath. Jason exhaled slowly, as if amused by a private joke no one else quite understood yet. "This isn't a drop-in yoga session," he said, stepping closer now, his presence filling the space between them. "People here take this seriously." Another ripple of laughter. Amanda didn't react. Not to the words. Not to the laughter. Her eyes moved briefly across the room, observing, calculating, noticing details most people ignored. The way a stance leaned too far forward. The hesitation in a transition. The overconfidence hidden behind routine. Then, her gaze returned to Jason, steady, unreadable. For a moment, something flickered across his expression, too fast for anyone else to catch. But it was there, a hint of something unexpected. Then it was gone, replaced again by that same confident smirk. He gestured toward the center of the mat, inviting without really offering a choice. "Go ahead," he said. "Show us what you've got." The room grew quieter, anticipation settling in like a held breath. Amanda stepped forward, slow, measured, each step deliberate. No rush, no hesitation, just presence. And somewhere in that silence, something shifted. Not loud enough to notice, not obvious enough to name, but real and irreversible. Because in that moment, without anyone realizing it yet, the balance of the room had already begun to change. Jason Carter had built his reputation on control, on reading people before they even moved, on turning hesitation into submission without ever needing to raise his voice. And standing there across from Amanda Brooks, he expected nothing different, just another demonstration, another moment to remind the room who set the standard. But something about her stillness lingered in a way he could not immediately explain. It was not fear, it was not uncertainty, it was something quieter, something that did not ask for attention, yet somehow held it. And that alone unsettled him more than he was willing to admit. The students circled slightly closer now, forming a loose ring around the mat, their whispers fading into a tense anticipation, a few of them folding their arms, others leaning forward just enough to catch every detail. Because this was the moment where things usually became entertaining, where confidence met reality and reality lost. Jason rolled his shoulders once, loosening up with practiced ease, his movements deliberate, controlled, every inch of him projecting experience, years of repetition, countless matches, a man who had nothing to prove yet always found a way to prove it anyway. He gave Amanda a brief nod, almost polite, but the faint curve of his lips betrayed the performance behind it. "Just follow along," he said, his tone measured, instructive, but laced with quiet condescension. "I will keep it simple." Another ripple of quiet laughter passed through the group, softer this time, more expectant than mocking, because now they wanted to see how quickly this would end. Amanda stepped into position without hesitation, her feet settling naturally, not stiff like a beginner, not exaggerated like someone trying to impress, just balanced, centered, efficient. Her hands relaxed at her sides before lifting slightly, ready but not aggressive, her breathing even, unforced, as if the room, the people, the pressure meant nothing at all. Jason noticed that, just for a fraction of a second, the way her posture aligned without effort, the way she did not mirror him like most newcomers did. And again that flicker returned, brief but undeniable. He pushed it aside instantly, replacing it with certainty, because certainty was what he knew. Certainty was what had never failed him. He took a step forward, slow enough to maintain control of the moment, to keep it instructional, to keep it his. When someone lacks experience, he continued, projecting his voice just enough for the class to hear, they usually react before they think. He reached out, initiating the movement, not fast, not aggressive, just enough to demonstrate, just enough to guide the outcome he had already decided. But Amanda did not react the way he expected. She did not tense. She did not pull away. She did not rush. She simply adjusted, subtle, almost invisible, a shift of weight, a change of angle, something so small it could have been missed if anyone blinked. And in that instant, something in the air tightened, not dramatically, not obviously, but enough that the closest students stopped breathing as loudly, enough that the room, without understanding why, leaned into the silence. Jason felt it then, not pain, not danger, but resistance to his expectation. A moment where the outcome did not immediately belong to him, and that had not happened in a very long time. His expression did not change, but his focus sharpened, recalculating, adjusting, because whatever this was, it was not going to follow the script he had written in his mind. And across from him, Amanda's eyes remained steady, calm, as if she had already seen the next move before it happened, as if she had been here before, many times, long before anyone in that room had ever noticed her. Jason moved again, this time faster, not enough to alarm the room but enough to reclaim control, because control was what defined him, what separated him from everyone else standing on that mat. His hand reaching with precision, his stance tightening as he prepared to guide the exchange back into something predictable, something teachable, something that would restore the balance he felt slipping. But Amanda did not meet speed with speed. She met it with timing, and timing, unlike strength, could not be seen until it was already too late to correct. Her foot shifted half an inch, her weight settling into a position that seemed almost casual, and yet everything about it changed the angle of the moment. Jason felt it instantly, that subtle misalignment between expectation and reality, like stepping onto ground that looked solid but moved just enough to break rhythm. The closest students leaned in further now, their earlier amusement fading into concentration, because something was happening that they did not fully understand, something that did not match the pattern they had seen so many times before. Jason adjusted. Of course he did. Years of experience demanded it, his posture tightening, his focus narrowing. He attempted to redirect, to demonstrate control through correction, but every adjustment he made seemed to meet a response that had already been prepared, not rushed, not forced, just there, waiting. Amanda's movements remained minimal, almost restrained, as if she was using only what was necessary and nothing more, her breathing steady, her expression unchanged, and that was what unsettled him the most. Not resistance, not difficulty, but the absence of struggle, the absence of effort, as if this was not new to her at all, as if she had already moved through this exact moment countless times before. The room grew quieter still. Conversation stopped entirely now. Even the shifting of feet softened, because the atmosphere had changed from curiosity to realization, not fully formed yet, not spoken, but present, a slow awareness that something unexpected was unfolding right in front of them. Jason attempted one more adjustment, a cleaner approach, more direct, designed to end the exchange quickly and reassert authority. But the moment he committed, Amanda responded, not with force, not with speed alone, but with precision so exact it felt inevitable. Her movement connected seamlessly, one action flowing into the next without hesitation, without wasted motion, and suddenly Jason was no longer leading the demonstration, he was inside it, reacting instead of guiding, his balance no longer his to control, his certainty replaced by calculation, rapid and incomplete. And for the first time since he had stepped onto that mat, his expression shifted, not dramatically, not enough for everyone to notice, but enough for those closest to see the change, the flicker of surprise, The brief loss of certainty, the realization that this was no longer a lesson he was giving, but one he had walked into without permission. Amanda remained silent through all of it, her focus steady, her presence unchanged, as if nothing about this moment required explanation, as if the outcome had already been decided long before anyone else realized they were watching it unfold. And in that suspended silence, with every eye fixed on them, the balance of the room tipped completely, though no one had yet said a word. Time slowed in a way no one in the room could explain, as if the air itself had thickened around them, every movement sharper, every breath louder. And in the center of it all, Jason Carter realized something he had not felt in years. He was no longer in control of how this would end. Amanda Brooks did not rush. She did not force anything. She simply completed what had already begun, her positioning precise, her transitions seamless, each adjustment removing options without drawing attention to it. And before anyone could fully understand what had changed, Jason's balance was no longer his own to command. His attempt to recover came a fraction too late, not because he lacked skill, but because the moment had already passed him. 3 seconds in, and the room stopped shifting, conversations gone. 5 seconds, and the students nearest the mat exchanged glances that carried more confusion than amusement. 8 seconds, and even those at the back leaned forward, sensing that what they were witnessing was not a demonstration. It was something else entirely, something that did not belong to routine or hierarchy. 10 seconds, and Jason's focus tightened into something unfamiliar, not panic, but recognition, the kind that arrives when certainty dissolves and leaves only truth behind it. Amanda's expression never changed, her breathing steady, her posture controlled, as if this outcome required no effort at all, as if she had only followed a path that had been there from the beginning. 12 seconds, and the silence became absolute, the kind that presses against the ears, where no one dares to move, because movement would break something important, something undeniable. And then, at 14 seconds, it happened, not loudly, not dramatically, just a simple, unmistakable signal that ended everything Jason had expected to prove. His hand tapping the mat once, controlled, deliberate, final, the sound soft but echoing through the entire room like a statement no one could ignore. And for a moment, no one reacted, not a single voice, not a single breath louder than the rest, because what they had just seen did not fit the story they had built in their minds. Jason remained still for a second longer, processing, recalculating, searching for something that would restore the version of reality he was used to. But there was nothing to correct, nothing to explain away. Only the undeniable fact that the person he had dismissed without hesitation had just rewritten the entire room in less than 15 seconds. Amanda released the moment as quietly as she had entered it, stepping back without flourish, without acknowledgement, as if nothing extraordinary had occurred, as if this had never been about proving anything at all. Her eyes briefly meeting Jason's, not with triumph, not with judgment, but with something far simpler, clarity. And then she turned, walking toward the edge of the mat with the same calm presence she had carried from the beginning, leaving behind a silence that no one knew how to break. Because some lessons do not arrive through words, they arrive through moments that leave no room for misunderstanding. And in that room, on that quiet afternoon, everyone had just witnessed one of them. No one moved at first, not because they were unsure what had happened, but because they understood it too clearly, the kind of clarity that leaves no room for excuses, the kind that settles into the chest and stays there. Jason Carter pushed himself up slowly, not rushed, not embarrassed in the way most would expect, but quieter, more measured, as if something inside him had shifted in a way that could not be undone. His eyes followed Amanda Brooks as she stepped off the mat, her posture unchanged, her pace steady, blending back into the edge of the room as if she had never been the center of it at all. A few students looked at Jason, waiting, expecting a correction, a joke, something to restore the familiar balance they relied on. But he said nothing, because there was nothing he could say that would make what they had just seen disappear. The truth had already settled, and it did not need explanation. One of the younger students, a man who had laughed the loudest earlier, lowered his gaze, his arms no longer crossed with confidence but hanging loosely at his sides. Another shifted his stance, suddenly aware of how much he had assumed without understanding. The room, once filled with quiet arrogance and routine certainty, now carried something different, something heavier, something more honest. Jason finally exhaled, a slow breath that seemed to release more than tension. It released the need to perform, to dominate, to prove. He walked toward Amanda, not with authority, not with superiority, but with something unfamiliar, respect, real respect, the kind that is not given lightly and cannot be faked. He stopped a few feet away, careful not to invade her space, careful not to turn this into another display. "Where did you train?" he asked, his voice lower now, not for the room, but for her. Amanda looked at him for a moment, her eyes steady, not cold, not warm, simply present, different places. She replied, her tone calm, offering nothing more than what was necessary. Jason nodded once, understanding more from what she did not say than what she did, because skill like that did not come from shortcuts. It came from years, from discipline, from choosing to remain quiet while others needed to be seen. A murmur began to rise behind them, not laughter this time, but curiosity, respect, a quiet shift in how the room viewed her. But Amanda did not turn to meet it. She did not absorb it. She did not change to fit it. She simply adjusted the sleeve of her hoodie and prepared to leave, as if the moment had already served its purpose and no longer belonged to her. One student stepped forward slightly, hesitation clear in his voice. "Are you coming back tomorrow?" he asked, the question hanging in the air with more weight than it seemed to carry. Amanda paused briefly, just enough to acknowledge it, then gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Maybe," she said, and that was all. She walked toward the door, the same way she had entered, without announcement, without expectation, and as the door closed softly behind her, the room remained still for one final moment. Because sometimes the loudest lesson is not delivered through words or victory, but through quiet truth that leaves everyone seeing themselves a little more clearly than before. The door had barely settled back into place before the room exhaled all at once, like something invisible had been lifted and replaced with a weight no one could quite name. Jason Carter remained standing near the center of the mat, not issuing commands, not correcting posture, not doing any of the things that once defined his presence. Instead, he watched the empty space where Amanda Brooks had stood, replaying every second with a clarity that refused to fade, because what had just happened was not luck, it was not a mistake, it was precision built over time. And for the first time in years, he found himself questioning not his skill, but his assumptions. Around him, the students shifted slowly back into motion, but the rhythm was different now, quieter, more deliberate, conversations replaced by thoughtful glances, movements. Less about showing and more about understanding. The same young man who had laughed earlier approached the mat again, this time with hesitation, adjusting his stance with a seriousness that had not been there before. Another student asked a question, but it was not about winning or dominating. It was about timing, about control, about what they had just witnessed and could not explain. Jason finally spoke, but his voice carried none of the earlier sharpness. "Again," he said, simple, steady. And the class followed, not out of routine, but out of respect for the moment they had shared. Drills resumed, but every movement now carried a different intention, as if each student was searching for something deeper beneath the surface of technique, something that could not be taught through words alone. Time passed quietly, the golden light shifting across the floor as the afternoon edged closer to evening, and yet no one mentioned her name again. Not because they had forgotten, but because they had not. Her presence lingered in every correction, every pause, every adjustment that now held more meaning than before. When the session finally ended, students gathered their things with less noise, less bravado. A few lingered longer than usual, exchanging thoughts in low voices. Jason remained last, standing alone on the mat as the room emptied, the silence returning. But this time it felt different, not heavy, not uncertain, but clear. He walked slowly to the edge, his steps measured, his mind still working through what could not be undone. And then, almost without thinking, he adjusted his own stance, testing the balance he had always trusted, noticing details he had overlooked, questioning habits he had never challenged. Because growth does not arrive loudly. It arrives in moments that refuse to be ignored. Outside, the evening air had cooled, the street quieter, the world unchanged. And yet something within that room had shifted permanently, something that would not Return to what it was before, and somewhere beyond that door, Amanda Brooks continued her walk without looking back, because she had never stepped in to prove anything to them. She had simply revealed what was already true, and sometimes that is all it takes to change everything. The next morning arrived quieter than usual, as if the echoes of the previous day had not fully settled, and inside the dojo, the atmosphere felt different before a single word was spoken. Students entered with less noise, fewer jokes, their movements more deliberate, as though each step onto the mat carried a weight they had only just begun to understand. Jason Carter stood near the center again, but something in his posture had shifted, not weaker, not uncertain, but more aware, as if he was no longer standing above the room, but within it, observing as much as leading. The early warm light stretched across the floor, illuminating the same space, the same walls, the same routines, yet nothing felt the same. A few students glanced toward the door more often than usual, not openly, not with expectation they would admit, but with curiosity that lingered beneath the surface, because once something like that happens, it does not leave easily. It reshapes the way people see everything. That follows, drills began without announcement, pairs forming more quietly, the sound of movement steady but subdued. Jason moved among them, offering corrections, but his words had changed, no longer sharp commands, now questions. Where is your balance? What are you missing? Prompting thought instead of compliance. The shift subtle, but undeniable. Midway through the session, the door opened again, not loudly, just enough to draw attention without asking for it. Amanda Brooks stepped inside the same way she had before, simple, unassuming, her presence almost blending into the background, and yet every eye noticed, not with judgment this time, but with something closer to respect, or perhaps curiosity shaped by humility. No one laughed, no one whispered. The silence that greeted her was not empty. It was aware. Jason saw her immediately, but he did not speak right away. He let the moment settle, let the room adjust. Then he nodded once, a small gesture, but one that carried more meaning than any introduction. Amanda returned the nod just as simply and stepped onto the mat, joining the space without hesitation, without ceremony. The students nearby shifted slightly, making room, not out of obligation, but out of recognition. The same young man who had asked if she would return found himself standing across from her, his earlier confidence replaced with careful focus, his posture straighter, his attention sharper, as if he understood now that presence was not measured by appearance. Jason's voice broke the silence, calm, steady. We continue. And the class resumed, but this time, the energy was different, not driven by ego, not shaped by comparison, but guided by something quieter, something more grounded. And as Amanda moved among them, not drawing attention, not seeking it, the room adjusted around her again, but not in the way it had before. This time, it was not the balance shifting against her, it was the balance aligning with her, because sometimes the greatest change is not in what is shown, but in what is finally understood. The rhythm of the class continued, but it was no longer the same rhythm they had followed for years. Something quieter guided it now, something more precise. And as Amanda Brooks moved through each drill, she did not stand out by trying to be seen. She stood out by never wasting a single motion. Her partner hesitated at first, unsure, cautious, but within moments that hesitation turned into focus, because every adjustment she made revealed something, not through explanation, but through experience. Jason Carter watched from a distance, his arms no longer crossed in authority, but relaxed at his sides, his eyes tracking not just Amanda, but the reactions around her, the way students corrected themselves mid-movement, the way they slowed down to understand instead of rushing to complete. The shift was undeniable, and it was not something he had commanded. It had emerged on its own, shaped by a moment no one could ignore. Midway through the session, he stepped forward, not to interrupt, but to engage, switch partners, he said calmly. And this time, when Amanda looked up, their eyes met again, not as instructor and newcomer, but as two people who understood the same language without needing to speak it. He gestured slightly, inviting her forward, not as a challenge, not as a display, but as a continuation. The room sensed it immediately. Conversation stopped, movement slowed, attention sharpened, because this was not about proving anything anymore. It was about understanding what had been revealed. Amanda stepped into position across from him. The same calm presence, the same steady breath, and for a moment, neither moved. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable, but focused, as if the entire room leaned into that single point of stillness. Jason adjusted first, not aggressively, not to dominate, but to explore, to test what he had missed before, and Amanda responded in kind, her movements just as measured, just as precise. There was no laughter now, no whispers, only the quiet sound of feet shifting against the mat, the subtle rhythm of controlled breathing, and something else, something unspoken but shared, respect, real respect, not given out of habit, but earned through clarity. The exchange unfolded without urgency, each motion revealing something new, not just about technique, but about awareness, about timing, about the difference between control and understanding. And as they moved, the students watched more closely than they ever had before, because this was no longer a demonstration. It was a lesson unfolding in real time, one that could not be written down or repeated the same way twice. And when it ended the same way it had before, quietly, without spectacle, without a need for acknowledgement. Jason stepped back first this time, giving space, not taking it. And in that simple action, the room understood something that no words could fully explain. The hierarchy they had relied on had not disappeared, but it had changed, reshaped by something deeper than rank or title. Amanda gave a small nod, nothing more, and returned to the edge of the mat, blending once again into the background she had never truly belonged to. And as the class resumed, no one spoke about what they had just seen, because some moments do not need to be explained, they need to be remembered. And in that room, every person carried it with them, whether they realized it or not. The class came to a close without the usual noise, no loud conversations, no exaggerated laughter, just the quiet sound of people packing their things with a kind of awareness that had not been there before. Jason Carter stood at the edge of the mat, watching as students left in smaller groups, their voices lower, their steps slower, each one carrying something they had not walked in with, something that did not need to be explained to be understood. Across the room, Amanda Brooks adjusted her hoodie again, preparing to leave just as simply as she had arrived. No attention drawn, no expectation of acknowledgement, and yet the entire room seemed to orbit around that quiet presence one last time. Jason stepped forward, not to stop her, not to question, but to meet her at a place that no longer required hierarchy. "You changed the room," he said, his voice steady, not loud, not performative, just honest. Amanda paused, her hand resting lightly on the strap of her bag, her eyes meeting his with the same calm clarity that had never wavered. "No," she replied softly. "I did not change anything." A brief silence followed, not awkward, not uncertain, but reflective, as if the meaning of her words needed a moment to settle. "It was already there," she continued. "People just had not seen it yet." Jason nodded slowly, not in agreement alone, but in understanding, because what she had revealed was not something new. It was something overlooked, something hidden behind routine, ego, and assumption. And now that it had been seen, it could not be unseen. A few students lingered near the doorway, pretending to adjust their belongings, but really listening, absorbing, because this was not just about technique anymore. It was about perspective, about how quickly judgment can replace curiosity, and how quietly truth can correct it. Amanda turned toward the door, but before stepping out, she paused just long enough to look back at the mat, not with pride, not with nostalgia, but with recognition, as if she understood that this place would not be the same again, not because of her, but because of what had been revealed within it. Then she left, the door closing softly behind her once more, and this time, no one rushed to fill the silence, because the silence itself carried meaning. Jason remained where he stood, his gaze resting on the space she had just left behind, and for the first time in a long time, he did not feel the need to prove anything, not to his students, not to himself, because the measure of skill had shifted, no longer defined by dominance, but by understanding, no longer measured by who could control the room, but by who could move within it without needing to be seen. And as the lights dimmed and the day came to an end, one truth remained, quiet but undeniable. Respect had never belonged to volume or appearance. It had always belonged to those who did not need either. And in that room, on that day, everyone finally saw what that looked like.